Hello, hello, hello! Cheers, Kevin here, and welcome back to our Rimworld Mechanitor playthrough out here on the ice sheet, where we are busily researching away. And as we kick things off, I did want to take a brief moment to thank all of you for the very warm welcome on the first video of our series. I'm excited to be giving this a shot once more, and as our first harvest begins to grow, we get our first visitors to the colony. It doesn't seem likely that they'll have a ton of use for us, but hey, let's at least see what's on offer. And indeed, it looks like there's nothing in particular that we want, but we can at least sell off some of the clothing that is taking up space. Unfortunately, the seller does not have enough silver to cover the cost of the transaction, so we'll have to settle for some packaged survival meals in exchange. That should, however, buy us a little extra breathing room if our harvest struggles through the coldest parts of the winter. And our new friends don't stick around. Since it is getting a bit cold, we find ourselves once again alone on the ice sheet. And just as we're beginning our very first rice harvest, we suffer from the ZZT event, immediately discharging our batteries and starting a fire. While Burke tries to protect our leather, we will bring our mechanoids near the outdoor flame. These mechanoids cannot be instructed to firefight directly, but they will put out flames in adjacent squares. Thanks to the resilience of the plasteel, however, it seems that there's no permanent harm done. It will, however, take a bit of time for our batteries to recharge, so the new crop of rice is going to be suffering a little bit as the temperature inside dips below the appropriate growing temperature. And even the next day, we're still struggling a bit to keep all our electronics powered, and we can see that while the rice is growing, it is taking some damage during those blips. If we end up with low health but mostly grown rice, we may need to force Burke to harvest things early. It just requires a bit of micromanagement on our part. For our next event, we do have a bulk goods trader from Quarados coming to visit, which could potentially be very interesting. And indeed, they do have a lot of steel for us to snap up, which I'm very excited about. Until we set up an orbital trade beacon, I don't think we can really expect to get much in the way of building materials, so we will take all of the steel we can get. To maximize what we can afford, we're parting with some of the packaged survival meals we purchased earlier, the wolf skin, and perhaps controversially, a basic subcore, which is used for creating more mechanoids, and some components. Unfortunately, we just don't have very much of value to trade yet, but the steel should help us along our way. And we are going to put the steel to immediate use in the form of a second hydroponics basin. This should give us a bit more breathing room and eventually let us look at some cash crops, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Unfortunately, even forbidding the doorway doesn't prevent the wandering trader's animals from wandering in and out, so we will need to keep an eye on our rice. Each time our airlock cycles, our heater has to work all the harder to get things back up to growing temperature. With things going so well, it seems that Randy has to take some steps to limit our optimism. Burke has come down with a case of sensory mechanites. This does improve her work efficiency, but at the expense of increased drowsiness and pain. Thankfully, Burke is a skilled physician, but we do have a pretty limited supply of medicine at this stage of the game, and this disease, I believe, can last up to 30 days, requiring treatment for pain every 2 days. We could use our new hydroponics basin to grow some heal root, but that does require a plant skill of 8, well above Burke's current 6. For now, we'll simply have to keep an eye on it, and hope things don't get much worse. Despite her condition, Burke does manage to complete the tree sowing research, so we can use some of our remaining steel to create a bonsai pot in which we'll start to grow a small tree. Each harvest will only yield us 1 or 2 pieces of wood, but as a renewable construction material, every little bit helps. For our next research project, I think we're going to go with drug production. There's nothing immediately critical we need to research, but this will help us start to turn a profit when the time comes. And that does leave us to start thinking about our next investment. We could begin to shore up power with a 3rd wind turbine. Though we do find ourselves 5 steel shy, we can eventually replace some of our interior furniture with wood in order to recover some of that steel. Alternatively, we can begin to make a push for the comms console and orbital trade beacon, which would require 160 steel all told, and take up a decent amount of space as well. Barring a convenient meteor, however, I do think that is our only way of really getting a decent chunk of building materials. For now, though, I think we'll hold off on making any steel investments, as if we can hold off through the winter, we'll have a bit more flexibility. In the meantime, we are going to make a modification to Burke's schedule by encouraging her to sleep and enjoy some recreation twice per day. This should hopefully improve her mood, as we can't really afford to experience a mental break out here in the freezing cold. Speaking of, we are struggling a bit to keep our power under control. Thus far, it doesn't seem to be destroying our harvest, but we do know that much colder temperatures are on their way. As our drug production research comes to a close, I think we're going to look at smithing next, as I'd like to begin our path toward auto turrets sooner rather than later in this series. That way we can stay safely indoors when it's needed. In the short term, we are very much going to have to keep an eye on Burke. Her mood penalties are stacking up pretty significantly, but hopefully as wood comes in, we can at least make some modest improvements. Randy then sends us some cargo pods. Don't get too excited though, it's just psychoid leaves, which we're not able to do much with. We will absolutely not say no, however, to a silver meteorite. It is not going to go very far for us, but certainly something we can mine out for trading once the weather is a bit warmer. And even as Burke is headed back home, we encounter a crashed transport pod. Given our lack of resources, however, this new visitor is not much more than a source of clothing. While Randy is feeling generous, though, he sends us some spacecraft chunks, which is probably the best thing we can hope for at this stage. We can, of course, deconstruct these, and we will gladly accept the steel. Over the next few days, we're able to harvest our bonsai tree for the second time. The low yield, however, does mean it's going to be a while until we're able to make good use of it. Right now, I'm thinking that we can use the wood to build some shelving, which would allow us to store things outside without them deteriorating, or perhaps simply build another bonsai pot to double our wood production. Those would cost 10 wood and 24 wood respectively, so we're a long way away either way we go. And despite the cooler temperatures, we do have another raid to fend off. Noiv Movoz is headed our way with a shortbow, which does provide some minor risk. What has me more worried, however, is their fire spew ability. We'll want to make sure that we engage far enough away from our base that Noiv doesn't damage any of our equipment. Thankfully, it looks like Noiv is focused on hunting our Constructoid, and after a bit of a firefight, he goes down. Another visitor drops by our modest colony, and I will say I'm surprised that we're still getting so many of these events this late in the year. As temperatures get colder, we're going to expect very few visitors. She does not have a ton on her, but we will definitely take some herbal medicine to help with the sensory mechanites. Unfortunately, we are still very much struggling to keep the indoors hospitable for our plants, a problem which I fear will continue to get worse as the temperatures drop. It's not all bad news though. We do get a quest sent our way, and unlike most of the rescue quests that we've just been automatically declining, this one seems mostly free for us. Aurelia of the Exodus Empire wants to perform a low-power weapons test, which will cause a fog around our colony for 5 days, pending our approval. They are offering 24 gold in exchange, and I can't imagine that fog will make the weather any worse, so we accept. And while the weather hasn't gotten worse, it certainly hasn't improved either. Just as I was debating whether to encourage Burke to harvest the 80% grown rice, things dip low enough that we lose the entire harvest. We do go through about 2 meals a day. Each season is 15 days, and we are 18 days away from spring, so we're not too far from being able to squeak through with the rice we have, along with our survival meals. Still, I'd like to be able to get a few more harvests properly harvested, and keep the survival meals for true emergencies. And with the outdoor temperature around -50, we lose yet another harvest. And as much as I wanted to encourage your input on whether we should play things safe or push for orbital trading, I don't think we can hold off on our steel any longer, so we'll go ahead and add a third wind turbine. I don't think this is going to fully solve our problems, but until we're better insulated, I think it is going to be necessary to get us through the winter. And with a whopping -71 degree temperature, we get another raid. It looks like Bai is absolutely not going to be comfortable, and since he's equipped solely with a melee weapon, I'd like to see if we can let Burke stay inside for this one. But at the last minute, I do get a little worried about getting too close to our wind turbines and giving by a new target. And that means I unfortunately cut things a bit close. Hypothermia is setting in, but our Constructoid isn't going to be able to stay out of melee range. Our plants are dead anyway, so let's let Burke help out just a little bit. A little while later, some cargo pods crashed down. These ones were filled with human skulls, which is not ominous at all. Despite the contents themselves being useless, we can absolutely make use of these steel slag chunks once we've constructed a smelter. Each chunk will yield 15 steel, though the smelter itself requires 170. So once we have 12 slag chunks available, it becomes a net positive investment. But now we experience something even more dangerous as a solar flare takes out our electronics. We are going to prioritize harvesting the rice immediately, but with the temperature outside being in the -80s, there's a severe risk to Burke herself. We're going to send her outside and force her to put on a toque, which should increase her safe temperature a bit, though it does only bring it down to -60. There's not really anything we can do to improve our situation though. Even leaving the room potentially wasted a decent amount of remaining heat, and we just don't have enough wood to build a campfire. Thankfully, as the temperature hits -68 degrees inside, the flare mercifully ends, and Burke survives to live another day. Say one thing for our time this winter, it has allowed us plenty of time for research. We've now unlocked gun turrets, and at some point in the future, I'm sure that'll be worth us investing in. By the end of winter, we have cut pretty deep into our survival meals, but the herald of another raid does indicate things are looking up for our colony. In fact, it's only during this shootout that I notice Burke's Mechanites have recovered, so her mood should hopefully be in a bit of a better spot going forward. We also need to take a moment to give our mechanoids their names. We'll be going with Daedalus for our Constructoid and Sisyphus for our Lifter, and hopefully they can live up to those excellent titles. Thank you very much to Epictetus for the suggestion. At this point you may notice a small change in my voice. I had to split up recording over a separate session, as we ended up with far less footage than I was expecting. I'm still getting used to figuring out how much Rimworld translates to a meaningful video, so I appreciate you bearing with me. I do think it's time to spend some of our wood. While we've been able to leverage the cold of the outdoors to prevent things from spoiling, items do still deteriorate. If we can put together some shelving, we'll have the best of both worlds. Also, I realized that I misspelled Sisyphus a moment earlier, which is a bit embarrassing. We do get a quest here, this one from the Ideology expansion, encouraging us to hunt down an ancient relic, a machine gun revered by our people. Now, I like a machine gun as much as anybody else, but I do suspect this can wait at least a little bit. Instead, with an eye toward the future, I'm going to draw out some base expansion plans. Now, I do want to keep the power conduits near the front of the base for now, so they're not embedded in flammable walls, but we can think about moving the sleeping spot and research bench back here, opening up space for an orbital trade beacon where the bench once was. Believe it or not, we have attracted our first recruit to the colony, a paramedic named Hunt, who is suffering from paralytic aplasia and thinks our colony is just the place for her. Unfortunately, we're not really accepting pledges right now, so Hunt is going to suffer the effects of the cold. But this does prompt us to name our faction and colony. For our faction, we are going to call ourselves the Lambda Collective, and our northern settlement we christen as Overclock. As Hunt's condition sadly worsens, we do get the chance for a ritual opportunity, which I think we do need to take. This will help us develop our ideology, as well as allow Burke the opportunity for a mood bonus that can help counteract any bummer news she might be receiving in the near future, such as news around the health of fellow colonists. I am fully aware of the cruelty on display as we dance upon hexagons while Hunt freezes to death, but perhaps the cold has made us a bit numb. It's while we're mining out some silver that, tragically, the inevitable happens. Farewell, Hunt, we hardly knew ye, mostly on account of your paralysis and our super awesome dance party. As we're finishing up the last of the silver, we get another raid. Burke does continue to mine, but we'll need to hurry back to defend the mechanoids. We don't, after all, want to let any poor, innocent, defenseless robots come to any harm. Just as we're getting ready to engage here, Randy sends another raider, so this first one can't be too prolonged. After dispatching our first visitor, Burke opts for a quick catnap. Firefight number 2 ends much the same, and death and destruction continue to rain down on the ice sheet. I think that is where we'll end today's episode. I am very excited for the next one. This was a bit slow as we started our trickle of resources, but the next episode is where things really start to pop off. As always, eager to hear your thoughts and suggestions down in the comments. Please hit subscribe and the like button and all of the other buttons, any buttons you can possibly find anywhere on the screen or your mobile device, or who knows, whatever you may be observing the screen on. So stay tuned for the next video where things really accelerate, and I will see you soon. Cheers.